Hey, Murray.
G'day, Phil.
Nice to meet you. Could you introduce yourself?
Sure, my name's Murray Powell. I'm the General Manager of Optimal Stormwater. Um, Started my career doing a degree in chemical engineering and then an MBA. I worked for the New South Wales government in their stormwater section. Then I was with a major proprietor. I've worked with a consultant. I've worked with a council. And for the last 10 years, I've headed up Optimal Stormwater here in Australia.
Great. Yeah, and I'm kind of know you supposed to be the Mr. GPT in New South Wales.
Yes, I do have that reputation. They do call me Mr. GPTs. I've been involved with probably about 4,500 GPTs over the past 25 years. So my main focus, I've been in stormwater my entire professional career, most of it looking at stormwater treatment, but more recently an evolution into stormwater harvesting, which is certainly part of the future of stormwater management here in Australia, but not just here, right around the globe.
Exactly. Yeah, great. You almost dedicated your entire career to the stormwater. What is the stuff attracts you to the stormwater?
Well, growing up, I spent half my life surfing and diving and fishing and playing water sports. I did a degree in engineering, and the two just naturally merged together. And I found myself attracted to the engineering elements of the water industry. And within those, the potable water, drinking water, and sewage are very well established industries. But stormwater was new, young, exciting, and having a massive environmental impact. So back in the 1990s, I was with a company here in Australia, and they announced that Sydney had won the Olympics, and they started spending millions of dollars. You know, we've got guests coming, we need to clean up Sydney Harbour. And there was a lot of money and focus on environmental protection. And I thought I need to be part of this, and never looked back, mate.
Great, great. You've been in this industry for more than 24 years. So from your experience, could you briefly just introduce what the WSUD history looks like in Australia?
Yeah, definitely. WSUD is a term called water sensitive urban design, as you probably know. Over in the UK, they call it SUDs, Sustainable Urban Drainage Schemes. In America, it's known as LID, Low Impact Development. And more recently in China, sponge cities. It's all an evolution and very similar concepts. It's about integrating water management. So historically, if you go back a century ago, it was all about removing sewage and supplying high quality drinking water. And, you know, stormwater just fell on the ground and went away. Hopefully it didn't flood anyone in the meantime. Over time, as things evolved, people got more focused on moving stormwater through the system so it didn't cause flooding. But the major criteria was all about conveyance and flooding. But then people realised that the biggest impact on our beaches and our waterways and our environment in general was coming in every time it rained. All the litter from our streets, the discharges from our factories and things, as well as sewer overflows and other things. But every time it rained, our environment suffered, especially all our waterways. And people started recognising that we were doing something to treat the sewer and sewer overflows, but now we needed to look, but those are concentrated sources, at the more diffuse and the harder problem to tackle, which is urban stormwater. And here in Australia, the councils typically are looking after it. In some areas, the water authorities also have a role. It's different in different places around the world, but certainly here in Australia, the councils own most of the stormwater. But where you would put pollution traps became a bit of a question. And like, do you put them right up at source? Yep. But then you need, you know, a lot of them. Or do you put them in the middle of the line, you need less? Or do you put them right on the end of the line, but then they're really big and really expensive? And the answer is, there's no one best answer. But then it was, well, these pollution traps are going to take out coarse pollution, gross pollution as it's known. Hence the term gross pollution traps. But that's not all pollution. There's also finer pollution, and then you've got soluble pollution as well. But it's like a treatment train. You need to start with the engine, which is your gross pollutant traps. Then you go to your caboose, your secondary carriages, right down to the caboose at the end. So primary treatment, secondary treatment, tertiary treatment, which is typically reuse. But in a stormwater sense, you might have gross pollutant traps followed by bioretention or wetlands, followed by further polishing and other things. So there is a logical way that we can take advantage of this huge resource. One thing you may not know is that if we trapped all the water that landed on Sydney, we would have 4 times as much water as we need for the whole of Sydney. It's a fantastic resource. All we've got to do is capture it, treat it, store it, and then be able to reuse it. So the major reuses of stormwater are for irrigation of golf courses and parks and playing fields, that sort of thing. Secondary uses are obviously toilet flushing, air conditioner top-up. There's plenty of other uses as well, yeah. But the primary one at the moment, 90% of the reuse is all happening for irrigation. So water-sensitive urban design has sort of evolved from not just primary treatment to add in secondary treatment, but it's not that, it's more than that. It's like integrated water management. So it's understanding potable demand and sewer and water leaving, and what are you going to do with that? Because in some cases, potentially mining the sewer might be a more viable option than to do stormwater harvesting, depending on how big the catchment is, what sort of water reliability you're after, etc. So there's no one solution fits all. It's a matter of looking at your particular case and the strengths and weaknesses, but the opportunities that you have in each of these situations. In some cases, you can do very, very cost-effective stormwater harvesting and get financial outcomes beyond belief that are very sustainable in the long term. And certainly a number of those have gone in here in Sydney, as around the world. And obviously places like China are now looking internationally to see where great projects have evolved and look to learn from that and bring that technology to their shores.
Exactly. So recently, like people talking about the green city, like green waterway, green line. It's all about green. But I believe you can add something about what's the relationship between green and grey.
Yeah. Like I mentioned before, with primary treatment and secondary treatment, you could also consider it grey infrastructure, typically because it's made of concrete and steel, it's quite engineered, and green infrastructure because it contains a biological and ecological element to it, which might be a gross pollutant trap and a wetland, or it might be a trash rack and a biofiltration system, etc. The grey and the green working together. Typically though, if you don't have the grey infrastructure, the pollution load, because the grey infrastructure will typically remove maybe 60 or 80 or 90% of the load of pollution. If you don't take that out, your wetland can't survive. It can't sustain that large load of pollution. So you might have a gross pollutant trap that's designed to do litter, organics such as leaves and grass clippings, sticks and things, and coarse sediments that obviously come from building activities, etc. So gross pollution, organics and sediments.
Yep.
That's what will harm your wetland. The wetland itself is going to be able to address fine sediments and TSS, total suspended solids, allowing them time to settle out, etc. Absorption and uptake and other biological processes to address soluble nutrients. And the other big one is bacteria. And when it's put into an open environment type situation, natural enzymes and microbes will attack each other, etc. And it'll decay the amount of bacteria in there. Also, the UV light coming from the sun will also have an impact to, again, reduce bacterial loads. So the grey infrastructure and the green infrastructure work in partnership. You can put in the grey infrastructure by itself, but you can't typically put in the green infrastructure by itself. It can't handle the loads, and you need to consider very much in the design the maintenance of both systems. And if you don't have the maintenance and the grey infrastructure working well, then you're almost doomed for failure with the green infrastructure, because the maintenance would be, well, the maintenance costs of your green infrastructure are typically many times higher than the grey infrastructure. The engineered solutions are typically much easier to maintain. Cleaning out a cylindrical, tank gross pollutant trap in the ground versus a great big biological wetland. Where do you pump the water to? What are you going to do with all the fish and the frogs and everything else that are in it? So there's lots more complications and costs associated with cleaning of your typical green infrastructure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned like maintenance is very important for all these like WSUD devices. And I've heard like you are writing an asset management policy, like a draft version or something. Could you introduce something about that?
Yes. Yes, I'm very honoured to be one of the key authors of the new New South Wales government guidelines that are coming out for the maintenance of stormwater treatment measures. The problem in our industry, and happy for you to quote me on this, the biggest problem with our industry is the lack of maintenance of these solutions that are put in. Some of the time it's the lack of correct maintenance, they're not being maintained correctly, and devices are left not working properly, or it's the lack of maintenance due to the lack of funding. Both of them need to be addressed. But one of the big problems we had in our industry prior to this guideline coming out was the government that was writing the guidelines weren't prepared to mention all the proprietary solutions. So it came to the Stormwater Industry Association to pick it up and get this manual produced. Now, I'm a previous president of the Stormwater Industry Association. I'm the longest serving member here. I'm currently in the role of secretary. I've been with them for a long time. They're a great organisation. But they're not government, so we can mention the proprietary solutions. So while other manuals exist to provide advice on wetlands and biofiltration, this one's heavily focused on how to correctly monitor, do a regular clean and an annual clean of all your grey infrastructure. Lots and lots of information in there, simplified so that the cleaning contractors can actually know what to do. And when they're quoting, all the cleaning contractors are quoting on exactly the same thing, which is the correct thing. So it's going to give better environmental outcomes, and I think it'll also start saving money. So we've been recognised at the National Stormwater Conference here in Australia for all the good work we've done. There's a very high demand for this manual. I'm in the process of finishing off the final edits at the moment. But one of the key things coming out of this is for every proprietary product here in Australia, not just each brand, but each model within each brand will have a one-page cleaning specification that the council can say you will clean in accordance with the guidelines, and the contractors will know exactly what to do. And it's been missing in our industry, and I think it's been missing in internationally most of the industries. So this is a major step forward in the evolution of stormwater coming out of Australia.
Sure. So here's a question: is like,
Sure.
What's the future of the stormwater and WSUD design looks like, in your opinion, and how optimal can what's the optimal role in this future?
Well, the future is never set. It's always hard to predict. Otherwise, we'd all make an absolute fortune, and we'd know exactly where to put our money and which horse to bet on, or which was going to be the next Microsoft. So, but what I do know about the evolution of stormwater here in the Australian market, certainly, is that it was traditionally focused on flooding and conveyance. It's evolved to focus then on gross pollutants. It's then evolved to take into account secondary pollutants and the treatment train, the green infrastructure. And people have been calling that WSUD, your water sensitive urban design. It's then evolved to also incorporate stormwater harvesting. And a lot of councils, certainly across New South Wales and Australia, are implementing stormwater harvesting schemes. They might cost $500,000 or $1 million or maybe more. And in fact, Optimal Stormwater does the ongoing operation and maintenance for probably 70 or 80% of the stormwater harvesting schemes here in Sydney. So we're very familiar with them and what it takes to run them and make them work. But there's been an evolution because people have been learning how to do it. And you learn from your mistakes. Not every one of these goes in perfect the first time. And they're designed by lots of different consultants and built by lots of different contractors. We take them over, fix them, make them work again, and hopefully give the outcomes that the community's after. So stormwater harvesting will continue to grow. But people are after more. And it's evolving into what they're calling water-sensitive cities. They want to take the stormwater and not just use it for irrigation. The future of stormwater will be water features, will be community vegetable gardens, will be used for water in the landscape. People love to sit around a tree and have a bubbling little creek next to them, etc. So you could have a creek, pump it back up, and it can flow down past you again. There are lots of, put it this way, if you had the choice of a house looking over another house or a house looking over a creek, a nice beautiful creek with trees and ferns and, you know, some frogs and birds and things, everyone will take the second one. Your property is worth more when it's associated with water.
Now
So
a
if you-
city will be
the
more
whole
attractive,
city
yeah.
is more attractive. There's other issues like the urban heat island effect. If you've got all concrete and bitumen and glass and stuff, it starts becoming quite hot. That's been well documented. But if you introduce trees and you introduce grass and you introduce water, the heat comes down. And it's much more pleasant and, yeah, everyone wins. So the market, the stormwater market here in Australia, and Australia is considered one of the leaders in this. Certainly the US and the UK are well acknowledged, and there are other countries that have done some great stuff as well. But yeah, Australia is definitely one of the leaders in this field internationally, and there are quite a few Australian experts that have gone overseas and provided advice to many people up in, you know, Korea and Malaysia as they've developed their stormwater manuals and policies and things as well. So it's great to see that you know, China is now pushing ahead faster than the others with sponge city technology and looking internationally at what's happening and trying to take that knowledge and look at how they can apply it over there. But as you know, I was recently in China,
Yeah.
and yeah, went over there for the expo.
Expo show, yeah.
Yeah, the International Imports Expo. Oh, I forget the exact term, but
I'd
very,
like to mention this is the first import expo in the world.
yeah, yeah. Oh, a major event. It got international coverage on the TV, etc. And it was huge. It was amazing. China is an amazing place. So many people compared to what we have here in Australia. Very different stormwater scenarios. You can't just take a solution from here in Australia and just go drop there, it's going to work. You've got to understand the catchment area. You've got to understand rainfall, runoff, the pollution loads, what you want to do with the stormwater. Is it just a matter of taking out the cigarette butts and you know, Coke cans, or do you actually want to treat it to a point where you can reuse it for irrigation, or even treat it even further than that and look at using it for cooling tower top up and air conditioners and things? Or do you want to take it one step further than that, which is treat it to an ultra high state for potable consumption? And mark my words, that's happening in a few places around the world where people don't even realize it yet. But in the next 50 to 100 years, people will realize water is more valuable than gold. You can't live. I can live without gold. I can't live without water. And you can't grow crops without water. And you can't, you know, half of our activities involve, you know, where would you prefer to go to a holiday? A nice beach in the tropics or a desert? And, you know, so people want clean water so they can swim and fish and you know, go scuba diving and sailing and things. There's a high demand for it, and that will continue to grow. But as the population on our planet continues to grow, we need more water for crops, for you know, people drinking and flushing toilets and everything that goes with society. So it's a curse and a blessing, but like I mentioned before, a lot of rain falls out of the sky. All we've got to do is learn how to catch it, treat it, store it, and reuse it. So rather than building one huge big dam, the future is not in centralised water capture as the only source of water. People are now looking at remote communities, decentralised capture.
Decentralised.
That's right, yeah. You can look at one little catchment. It might turn out to be 5 hectares or it might be 100 hectares. But the amount of water that would come off that would easily sustain virtually all the uses within that catchment if you could catch it, treat it, store it, reuse it. And the whole market is evolving towards that. But I tell you what, one of the aims that I would hope to see in my lifetime is stormwater being reused to an extent that it's fit for potable consumption. So hopefully we can drink it in the future. We're not there yet, but that's where we're finally heading.
Exactly. Yeah. Sounds very exciting. Yeah.
Yeah.
To achieve that future, we're gonna need more public education and definitely we need more water engineer. So
We do.
yeah,
It's-
what's your suggestion for like young
young students and
young
things.
students and junior water engineers?
Look, when I first started in this industry, going back 25 or 30 years ago, I thought there are two growing sectors of the market that really interest me. One was alternative energy and the other was the environment. And within the environment, I thought the most crucial element of that is the water industry. It's still true today. Alternative energies, looking at lessening our environmental impact on this planet, getting away from fossil fuels and combustible greenhouse gases and things, that's fantastic, and I really support that, and that's another area that I think is going to be a boom industry into the future. Electric cars and solar power and all that sort of stuff, bring it on. But water is going to be the other element. Can't live without it. Everyone needs more of it. And as our environment and planet get impacted by greenhouse gases and global warming and that sort of stuff, we're going to be facing new challenges like sea levels rising, and they're going to create impacts on other stormwater systems and flooding and all sorts of communities. And then, of course, as you get older, your existing infrastructure ages and it cracks and fails and breaks down. Then you need to look at asset management and asset renewal. Not a very sexy topic, but crucial for the society to operate as it does. So certainly for young engineers, there are many strains of engineering, civil and structural, electrical and everything else. For me, I think the two most exciting are alternative energy and the water industry.
So what's your advice for the young engineer, like for your career advice?
Oh,
I know.
it's
What I've been learning from you is like a fire, the passionate from the bottom of your soul to the stormwater. It's almost like stormwater is running in your veins.
Look, I've been in it for a long time. I love it. It's part of me. It's not about the money. I mean, you need to run a successful company to support the good that we can do. So I'm very proud that at Optimal Stormwater, our solutions are based not just on the highest treatable flow rate or achieving one objective. All the solutions that we come up with are a compromise between capital cost and long-term cost, between safety and aesthetics, between flow rate and functionality. Like when we typically design a new gross pollutant trap, I take 38 different parameters and things into account. It's not just a matter of going, here's our site, there's our flow rate, I need one of these. There's so many things that get taken into account. Our industry is quite young. We don't have a lot of formal standards, etc. There's new products. At our national conference, there was another 4 new products that entered the market. That's great news. So if we can evolve our products and get better performance, enhanced outcomes, that's brilliant. Young, new engineers, new minds, new way of looking at things. Brilliant, bring it on. That's going to help evolve our industry, evolve what we can technically do and deliver into the field. It's an exciting future, I think, and water is going to be a major focus of it. At the moment in the media, there's a lot of talk about microplastics, especially in the oceans. And people catching fish and cutting them open, etc., and half their guts full of plastic. Turtles that assume a plastic bag is a jellyfish and eat it, and of course then they die. So there's been a lot of research now put into the impact of our society on the world's oceans, and it's not a good impact. So you need these type of solutions. But you're right, it's about education, it's about good policy, it's about preventing pollution from getting into the system with street sweeping and spill control and garbage bins and things. You know, having adequate facilities. But then once it does get in, you can use pit traps and you can use gross pollutant traps and media filters and trash racks and oil and grit separators and baffle traps and things. And then you can get down towards the end of the line. You start looking at the more biological, larger scale solutions. Obviously, swales and biofiltration, bioretention systems, wetlands, all manner of harvesting and reuse applications, etc. And so WSUD in Australia or LID or SUDs or sponge cities, it's all an evolution of stormwater management, integrating it with other management, integrating it with urban development, with the builders, with the developers, the consultants, the governments that are putting this in. You can't design transport systems and new societies if you don't consider water, sewage and drainage, stormwater. So those two old industries, they're not as exciting. But stormwater, it's where the new growth is, the exciting part. It's where the world is evolving and developing. And stormwater is the potential solution in so many situations. If you go out of the major cities into the more rural areas, lots of people have farm dams. They have to catch the water, take it into the dam. They might have a little pump it up through some sort of rudimentary filter, and that's the water they've got to drink. It's been done that way for hundreds of years. But we can learn from the ways we've done it in the past, but we can learn from new technologies being developed around the planet. You go from coarse screening to fine screening to settlement, etc. You can put it through ultrafiltration and reverse osmosis, and it's cleaner than the water that comes out of your tap. The technology is there and available. It's all just a matter of money, the need, the drivers, and it's different in every place. So you have, as soon as you get up towards the equator, you get a lot more rain and a lot more, the focus is more on conveyance and stopping flooding, etc. They've got plenty of water. The further away from the equator you get, they're screaming out for water. They don't get nearly enough. And you know, those sort of areas are going to be very focused, especially away from the cities, on trapping all the water they can and reusing it. And where do you trap it? It lands on the ground. As soon as it lands on the ground, it becomes stormwater. Yep. It's rainwater while it's falling through the sky. As soon as it hits the ground, it's stormwater. Now we need to try and trap it, control it, make sure we don't flood anyone. But if we can treat it and protect our environment, that's the first step. But even better than that, if we can trap it, treat it and reuse it, that's setting us up for the future, mate. It's all good.
Awesome. Okay, change the topic.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've done auditing before, and recently, like as you mentioned, auditing is a one way. Like we can, you know, firstly understanding what's going on the ground. Secondly, it's like we can produce a database, which for future maintenance, etc., etc. So there's one interesting case study, which is like I think we did in the south, like coastal area of New South Wales. In that particular study, there's a 70% of the device is non-operational when we audit it. It's a quite interesting like a result. What's your opinion?
Look, we've been involved in auditing probably at least half the councils here in Sydney already and several others around the country. And statistically, get this, about 90% of the stormwater devices that have gone in are not working at their full potential. Now, in some cases, it's a poor design. In other cases, a good product has been swapped out by the contractor and a poor product put in. In some cases, it's been installed poorly. But in a lot of cases, maintenance has been one of the key elements, either doing the maintenance wrongly or way insufficient maintenance. And councils who own the majority of these devices, in a lot of cases, they've never been trained up in what to do and how to maintain them correctly. So that's something that Optimal obviously provides them if they want. But when we do these audits, we find out, we have a look at these systems civilly, structurally, hydraulically, from a work health and safety point of view, and from an ongoing maintenance point of view, and work out what's working and what's not, and why. The why is the very important part, because that leads into the recommended options for either upgrading it, decommissioning it, or maybe it's a maintenance issue and we need to retrain either the council or the cleaning contractors in how to do their job correctly. In a lot of cases, you can find an asset worth $200,000 that's not working, and for $5,000, it can be fixed and working at 100%. It's happened many times. What actually happens in the industry, as you probably know, Phil, is people get involved. We want to achieve an environmental outcome. That's how it starts. The community wants a clean beach or a clean river. And the politicians sort of say, we want that as well. And then the councils go, well, we're going to put some money to do that and make that happen. And then someone does a design. So that's the first step, design, or concept design, and then detailed design. Once you've done the design, then there's the supply of the products and the construction of the solution. Once you've done that, then hopefully there's the maintenance of the solution. This is where it often falls over. The maintenance, obviously, not done correctly or not done frequently enough, but very commonly not reported back to the people who are involved in the design and the approval of that solution. So you've got your design, your construction, your maintenance, and there's no feedback getting back to the designers to say that worked or that didn't work. Yeah? The auditing provides that. That feedback and information goes back to the people who need to know, so they start designing better solutions. They start approving better solutions. If that feedback doesn't happen, you just repeat the same mistakes you made last time. So the auditing is critical in the long-term management of not just stormwater, but any sort of infrastructure, but stormwater especially, because it's young and lots of different solutions have gone in, and people make all sorts of claims about performance. But if you get field validated information on what's working and what's not, it takes away all the glossy brochures and just puts facts in front of the owners and operators of these systems. So if you can get that information and feed it back in, you get better solutions next time. And then that feeds back in, and then you get a continuous evolution and improvement of all the stormwater solutions. That's the benefit of auditing. So when we do an audit, we produce a report that comes out with it, of course, what we call a data sheet on each of our stormwater traps. That gives all the critical information on that particular device. A one-page specification for how to clean it, and a spreadsheet that's got all the recommended rectification options and the ballpark pricing that goes with it. So then the owner, the council or whoever the owner might be, can make informed decisions. It might cost $5,000 to get twice the performance. It might cost $50,000 and we can get 5 times the performance. But is 5 times enough? That's only, let's say it was only working at 10% to start. For $5,000, you can make it work at 20%. Or for $50,000, I can make it work at 50%. Or it's going to cost $200,000 to get it working at 90%. And then the owner's got the information to make an educated decision. The other great thing that comes out of auditing is when you've got accurate information on all your stormwater assets, you then know the catchment area that's feeding in. You can determine the pollution loads that you're expecting. You know the performance expectations of each of the devices, or certainly we do, and you've got the storage volume in the device. So based on those 4 parameters, you can work out the typical cleaning frequency required. Then the council or the owner gets a quote for how much it will cost to clean it. And then you can work out that, 3 times a year, it's going to cost, $1,000, $1,000, $1,000. And then once a year, it's an extra clean. As I mentioned, with the auditing, once you know the catchment area and the pollution load coming in, the performance of the device and the storage, you can work out how often per year you need to clean that. And it may well be that you clean it 4 times a year. It costs $1,000 the first time, $1,000 the second, $1,000 the third, and maybe $2,000 on the fourth. The reason it costs more is once a year you've got to do additional things. You've got to climb inside, you've got to inspect behind screens, you've got to make sure the moving parts are still moving, you've got to grease the lids. It's like the difference between doing a normal service on your car and doing a big 100,000k service. You do one of those once per year. Once you know what it's going to cost to clean that device correctly once a year, and you do that for all your other devices, you can actually work out to do the job of cleaning all my stormwater assets correctly, it's going to cost this much. At the moment, I'm spending that much. But until councils know what it costs to do the job correctly, they assume that this figure is satisfactory. We provide them the information, we provide them the ammunition, if you like, for the maintenance managers to go to their bosses and say, hey, look, for us to do our job correctly, maybe we can't afford that, but maybe you can get us a bit closer. And that puts more money into the maintenance, and the major reason for failure of the assets to not meet their expectations, the primary reason is due to maintenance. So if we can get it done better and get it done more frequently, we're going to dramatically improve the outcomes from our existing assets. But from the auditing, we learn from our existing assets what's working well and what's not. So you learn more from your failures than you do from your successes. And it's important to not just look forward all the time, but also to look back and say, you know, did that work or not? And if not, why not? And how do we learn from that and move forward? So auditing is a critical element in the whole stormwater life cycle, if you like. And it's only really in recent times that this has sort of been acknowledged. And optimal stormwater was one of the first to acknowledge that. And we're very good at what we do. And we have a nice niche in doing that here in Australia, and very happy clients as a result. They definitely, once we've done the audit and we go through all the information, they typically, oh my God, look at what we've actually, look at what's working well and what's not. And they feed that back into the development approval engineers and their own engineers and their sustainability section and their cleaning managers, and then that goes to the cleaning contractors, and everyone learns and evolves. So the more educated everyone is, the better decisions they make, better outcomes from stormwater management.
Exactly. And you're talking about like maintenance is very, very important. I'm super agree with that one.
Yeah.
And when we design those devices, not only we take care of the capital cost, but we also need to take care of the life cycle or lifespan cost as one of the important things in our design. So what's your experience about that one?
You are 110% correct. What typically happens is when councils are putting in a device, someone decides on the budget without knowing what it costs to do the job correctly. They might say, we've got $200,000 to do this solution. To do it correctly might cost $300,000, and then you get a solution that's dumbed down to the budget, etc. If you're dealing with a developer whose job is to put in, his objective in life is to make money for himself, he will put in the cheapest thing that will be approved. So if councils approve poor quality devices, then, eventually it gets handed back to council and they end up with the problems. What you will typically find is the long-term maintenance costs, if you assume, say, a 50-year life, are going to be at least double to triple the initial capital investment. So to design and construct and install a device, let's say it costs you $200,000, I would be expecting the maintenance over the next 50 years to be costing $500,000. So when you take that into account, which is the more important cost figure? It's the long-term maintenance. So when you're deciding on solutions, and you'll find this happens almost every single time, if you go for the cheaper solution, it's got more expensive maintenance. If you go for the solution that's a higher price but got lower maintenance costs, after 50 years, you might end up hundreds of thousands of dollars ahead. Not only that though, the better quality device is probably going to give you a better environmental outcome for a cheaper price in the long term, but at a higher price initially. So it's always worth keeping in mind. But at the end of the day, when you're designing, a couple of key things to keep into consideration. Don't design a solution that's going to flood anyone. There's no point in putting in a stormwater trap of any kind, a big grate in the system, and then the water just builds up and overtops and floods everyone. That's not a go. The next thing is you're putting it in to achieve an environmental objective. Lots of people in the past have said, oh, the most important thing is it's got to be cheap. Well, the cheapest solution is do nothing. So you're not putting in a stormwater trap to do nothing. You're putting it in to achieve an environmental outcome. So once you've achieved that environmental outcome, now we want to minimise the long-term maintenance costs. Because as I mentioned, biggest failure in these systems is lack of maintenance, lack of funding to do the maintenance. So that if you can make long-term maintenance more cost-effective, you've got a greater reliability in your outcomes, and you're going to achieve far better outcomes. So, yep, you're 100% right. Life cycle costs or long-term costs more important than your capital, and yeah, a lot of people out there still need to learn that lesson.
True. Great. Later, I want to talk about like different types of GPTs. So we've got like some different types of GPT when we do the auditing, and there's a specific one like they use vortex technology, and I would like to say like most of that device is like compared to other device, they have a better outcome. Could you just introduce something about like different types of GPTs and which one is like suitable for which kind of catchments?
Sure. There's three basic technologies when it comes to GPTs. The technologies are settlement, so you slow the water down and you hope to settle out the pollution. There's screening, so you run it through a mesh or a rack or a bar or something. And the other one is vortex technology, where you use the force or velocity in the incoming water to spin it, basically creating a whirlpool and pulling the pollution into the middle. But there is one GPT on the market that is a combination of all three. It's got a non-blocking screen. It uses the vortex technology, pulls the pollution into the middle, and then it sinks into a sump that's underneath. So it's stored offline. It doesn't fill up in the screening area. It doesn't have a decreasing flow rate. It's got a high reliability, and that's the reason. And it's an Australian product. It was developed here down in Melbourne, in Victoria, back in the 1990s, and now it's gone right across the world. It's, as far as I'm aware, the #1 selling stormwater gross pollutant trap over in America. It took America by storm, and they've never looked back. It's the #1 selling GPT here in Australia for very obvious reasons. The main competitors are sort of here, and here, and that product's up the top. It uses a combination of the technologies, but because of its reliability, it gets far better outcomes. Not only that, the cleaning contractors really like it because you're not having to get inside and unblock a whole lot of screens typically. But if you store pollution in the screening area, as it fills up, your flow rate that you can treat through the device decreases. And as the new flow comes in, if you're storing the pollution in that treatment area, the new flow coming in resuspends that and helps to block your screens. So it's important to understand the differences and the claims by different proprietors. They can be quite deceptive at times. The other main breakdown, if you like, is devices that have a guaranteed treatable flow rate and devices that have a design flow rate. You'll typically find the design flow rates are very high, but when you're looking at pollution modelling, here in Australia, the main model that's used for engineering stormwater management is a term called MUSIC, the Model for Urban Stormwater Interception Conceptualisation. Yep. Everyone knows it as MUSIC. That is based on a continuous flow of pollution going through a system. But if your system starts at a high flow rate and decays down to nothing and stops, then it doesn't work in that model. Only continuous systems, so a baffle system. There are several proprietary products that don't have screens, and they will all have a guaranteed flow rate through them. Also things like sedimentation basins and wetlands that don't have screens will have a continuous flow going through them, and this one particular GPT here in Australia. Good news for the rest of the world, though, is here in Australia, that 1GPT has not only been transformed over into the UK and over into the USA,
Yep.
obviously it'll be going into China very soon, as well as multiple places through the rest of Asia. But there are now multiple suppliers of that particular technology here in Australia. So they're young and evolving. The company that's got that technology here at the moment is still ahead, but the others are catching up fast. So in due course, there'll be multiple products available with that same really high performance technology. So that's going to be another evolution in our market.
Great. So what's your opinion, like, in the future, how could we improve, like, firstly, it's come from auditing. Secondly, it's like the technology involved, and the marketing, like people being educated, like more and more to be familiar with this kind of like a stormwater stuff. So in the future, how could we improve?
Well, you can improve almost every facet of everything we do, but certainly education is a key one. And I can remember when I was a child, most people didn't know the difference between stormwater and sewer. Everyone thought, the stormwater that ran down the gutter in front of your house went to a sewage treatment plant. And in some cases that's true, where you've got combined systems. But in most cases, and certainly not in Australia, it's separate systems. And but initially there was not a lot of school education on environmental issues and specifically on stormwater. These days, our children are a lot more educated than we are in environmental issues, and that's fantastic. So that evolution is helping things. People want to be involved in protecting the environment and sustainable futures.
Exactly. It's an opening day of one of our project, Blackmore Oval. Like the mayor of the council comes and a bunch of primary students come, and they naturally transfer the site to a classroom to teach the children what's our stormwater looks like and how beneficial this kind of devices can bring to our society. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, that particular project is a fantastic example of, let's call it urban renewal and water sustainability, because many years ago, when a major road was built nearby, they built a sedimentation and spill control basin, and it was never maintained. Surprise, surprise. But over time, because there was water permanently stored in it, macrophytes grew, and other things, ecology moved in. There were frogs, there were birds, there were, fish living in it, etc. But the wetland itself was also full of rubbish and illegal dumping, and it wasn't attractive. So there were also the issues of vermin and mosquitoes and other things. It wasn't it was decreasing the property values. It wasn't an asset, it was a liability. Council decided to spend some money, fix it up. But at the same time, there was an oval right next door, and they said, as part of the same project, let's do a stormwater harvesting system. So we extract water. So Optimal Stormwater won the project to redesign it and then build it. So we extract water from the stormwater, we treat it to a very high standard, put it into a tank, and use that to irrigate the sports field that's there. If we've got too much water, we actually pump it over and into the wetland, and it fills up in the wetland, goes through a biological treatment process. But it's more than that. Around the wetland, not only have we got plants and things in there, we've got little areas and logs and things for lizards and frogs and things to live on. Introducing ecology, there's microbats. We've got little bat boxes in the trees. But we've also put a pathway that winds its way right around the wetland. And that's to bring people back to connecting with nature. People like to go for a walk. It's healthy, it's good, especially people with strollers or riding bikes, etc. This gives them something. They can ride around, they can look at the wetland, they can see it from multiple angles. Well, there's seats in there. You can sit there and eat your lunch and look at a beautiful wetland as opposed to the eyesore that was there before. So it's about not only the sustainability for the sports field, but bringing back ecology, and not just ecology for the sake of ecology, but it's a destination. People will now go there deliberately to sit there and eat their lunch, to walk past it, to sit there and look at how the new plants are growing in the wetland and that sort of thing. It's going to attract birds and other flora and fauna. So it's for $500,000, a fantastic outcome for not only the environment but also the local community. So you're right, the mayor was there and the media was there and the local students were there and they were all learning about stormwater. Fantastic outcome for everyone. Very proud to be involved.
Pretty good projects, and I'm very proud. I've been part of that project, and in the future, I want to because take my personal view is I'm very enjoy at the current work, and part of the reason probably is because of you, Murray. Is I steal your passion. I steal your passion about the stormwater, and I find that's fire me. In my mind is as you say, every time I walk to the office, we smell. That's true.
Well, it's great to come to work doing something that you love, having a positive outcome. So when we go out on site and we're digging a big hole in the ground and we're installing a gross pollutant trap and someone walks along and they go, "What are you doing?" We can say, "We're protecting your environment." And in every case, the community goes, "Oh, that's fantastic. Yep, keep up the good work." And you go home, you sleep well, and you feel good about yourself. There are plenty of things where, you don't have a lot of outcomes that are notable or proud. But in the engineering area and the environmental area, you can have outcomes that you can tell your children about in years and years to come, and leave the world in a better place than what you found it. And if you can find a job that gives you intellectual stimulation, it gives you challenges. Have you ever had a job here where every day's been the same? The answer is no, hell no. Especially when we do our auditing, where every site's different. But when you can find a job that you love, that's rewarding, and you can earn a good, income doing it as well, that's the be all and end all. So plenty of people have high-paying jobs that they're not happy at. We've got a job where we earn enough money to keep ourselves comfortable, but you go home happy at the end of the day. So yeah, very proud of what we do, and I'm very happy to have you as part of the team, Phil.
Thanks. Okay, final question. Just back to the auditing.
Yes.
Could you, give people who want to do auditing or who didn't think about auditing before, but it's probably a good time to think about what's happening in the auditing. Could you, give us a brief process or whatever? Say first step to do what, second step what's going to be following, and how to achieve that good outcome.
Right. One of the toughest things in auditing of stormwater treatment systems is finding the right company to help you do that. And this is not meant to be a marketing thing, but you've got to have people involved that have an extensive knowledge of all the different proprietary solutions. So you don't want to be going out and finding new things that you've never heard of before.
Yep.
So the people involved have to be knowledgeable, but they also have to be independent. So unfortunately, you can't use the cleaning contractors to report on how well they're cleaning the devices. That's a conflict of interest. They're always going to report they're doing their job perfectly. May not be the case. You can't use the people that were involved in designing it and constructing, because they will also want to tell you what a fantastic solution it is. You need people that are knowledgeable and independent. So sometimes that can be the hardest thing, in finding someone that's got the skills, the training, in confined spaces, the equipment, gas detectors, emergency breathing apparatus kits, etc., tripods and harnesses, staffs and torches and things. And as you know, it's not pretty work. You're climbing underground, getting covered in spiders, webs and cockroaches. You come out dirty and stinking. It's not a pretty job, but it's very rewarding and it's very, very worthwhile. The information we get is fantastic. It's hard for some councils to even conceptualise it and to start. The first thing is to find someone that can help you to do that. we don't need a lot of information to start the auditing process, but we do need to know where the sites are. So hopefully council has a list of their assets, and we can actually get out there and sequentially, so we would actually put it down on a map and mark out where every one of their assets is. Then we would work out a logical path of least resistance, if you like, to actually accessing each of those in a logical sequence. We do the inspections, we do the underground inspections, we do the photography involved. So you want to have accurate pictures of everything that you're finding. It's a record. So you would do an audit in 2018 or 2019, and then you would come back and do it again once a decade later. So in 2029, you would come back and do it all again. An audit is not something you do every week or every year. An audit is a very extensive understanding of all your assets in the ground and how they're performing. Councils or owners of these stormwater treatment systems don't need to specify too much about what they need out of the audit. It's good to talk with the auditing company, and so you both understand exactly what's being priced up and what you're going to get. But in different locations, different clients are wanting different sort of things and different outcomes. You know, these audits aren't all exactly the same, but there's a lot of commonality. 80–90% of it is common. But we certainly need to know where they are to start, and then we can get in and do our job. Then we report back to council, and as a result of that, we've commonly, as you probably know, we would do a PowerPoint presentation, and that leads into capacity building at council. So not only have you got great information on all your devices, you know what needs to be fixed and what your options are and your costs are to address that. But that knowledge has gone from my head to your head, and from your head to the owner's head. But not just the manager of the maintenance section, it's gone to the development approval engineers, the environmental section, the sustainability section, the cleaning contracts, etc. And we've empowered them with a lot more knowledge and education, capacity building within the client, so they all know more, they can all make better decisions, of which maintenance and the funding of the maintenance is a key element. So I don't know if that answers your question correctly, but
pretty much.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah. You've been invited to US to present this kind of like similar idea into the United States. So what you planning to tell them?
Yes, after presenting a paper at the national conference here in Australia, I did have a US delegate come up to me and say that they would very much like me to come over and present a similar paper at their American conference. And it was looking at your assets as to whether they're a waste of money, a ticking time bomb, or a fantastic resource. And I could give examples of each. And the other half of it was to look at the new state guidelines here in New South Wales, how they've evolved to where they are, what they contain, and how the owners of the stormwater traps are going to use that in the future. So basically, informing the rest of the industry what's in the manual and how they're going to use it. And different places have different policies and guidelines and manuals and all that sort of stuff. This one here has a specific focus on the grey infrastructure and the proprietary solutions that there was just no information on before. And everyone's gone, thank God we finally got this information. And in America, they've had a similar issue, and I think they're looking at it going, wow, we need this information as well. So they've had a big focus over there traditionally on the green infrastructure, and they've gone, wow, we need this information on the grey infrastructure as well. So I think that was why they said, Murray, we need you to come over to our conference as well. So very likely I'll be heading to the US to get up in front of another conference and tell them about stormwater.
And I'd like to, China is also very welcome to Murray to share this kind of knowledge for the stormwater.
During my recent trip to China, I was lucky enough to be in Shanghai, and beautiful city, amazing people, fantastic food, very different stormwater over there to what we have here in Australia. I would suggest that they're probably a fair way behind where Australia is in stormwater management, but they are catching up rapidly. the evolution and the promotion of sponge cities is a big step in the right direction. I'm a huge advocate for the direction that the government has actually pushed, and obviously the funding that they're encouraging to make this all happen. I think China is they're going ahead in leaps and bounds. They're catching the other international countries that are well known in stormwater management. They're not there yet, but they're going faster than anyone else. China is acting like a sponge for the knowledge from the rest of the world to come in, and they're using that for their advantage. And you know, if they can take advantage of international experts to give them a hand, they should definitely be doing that. I think they're on a good thing. I think they're heading in the right direction. They've got a long way to go. They've got a lot of area, and they've got a lot of people. There's a lot of stormwater issues to be addressed, but with the government's commitment at the moment, I'm very optimistic that China is going to be a fantastic place for stormwater development and evolution over the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
Great. Thanks, Murray.
Thanks, Phil. Cheers.
Cheers.